A new term is emerging in the marketing industry. It's called pitch maxing. Exaggerated AI promises, aggressive pitches are driving job cuts in the marketing industry. That is according to one leading expert. Let's bring in Darren Woolley from TrinityP3 in Sydney for us. Good to see you, sir. Talk to us about what pitch maxing actually is and the impact on jobs.
Well, Ahron, this has actually been brought to the industry's attention this week by the second largest industry holding company. And I think the timing is important because next week is the biggest event in the annual calendar for advertising, which is the Cannes Lion Festival of Creativity, held in the south of France, where you'll see thousands of advertising creatives and their clients getting together. Publicis Groupe have released a video which is basically accusing their competitors of overpromising and under-delivering. Now, this is not new. For years, for as long as I've been in advertising, part of the game of winning a client's business is making all sorts of promises. What is new is that AI is allowing them to make all sorts of promises that perhaps their IT department is nowhere ready to deliver. And I think that's the interesting part here.
What's the risk then of overpromising AI?
Well, as we've seen in many situations, the big promise that most agencies are making is faster, cheaper, better. And often what's happening is that technology can't actually deliver that at the moment. So the agencies are then defaulting to going back to manual ways at very low cost behind the scene. And invariably one of those three promises not being delivered. It's either ends up not being cheaper, not being faster, or not being better. And in the worst case scenarios, all three. But the hard part for marketers is if they believe this, and then they appoint the agency and the agency doesn't deliver, what can they do? If they go back to market, they're basically admitting that they made a mistake the first time. If they try and sue the agency for breach of contract, then they're admitting very publicly that they made a mistake. And so in some ways, this is foolproof for the agencies because if they get appointed, the client has to commit to them for the term of the contract and they'll be getting paid to underperform.
So then who benefits from this AI hype?
Well, I think first of all, the AI companies that are selling this promise are doing a very good job at making everyone believe that AI is making us more productive. And yet they're patchy results at best. But the agencies, of course, the agencies benefit because if they win a bigger share of that pie, from that client, then they're going to profit from it. And in a market that's incredibly competitive, having any sort of advantage, particularly one that's putting more value into the client's pocket for the same or less money, is very attractive at the moment. We're in a global economic tightening. Let's not call it anything more than that. But marketers are really struggling to deliver their whole marketing program with the money they've got. So an agency that comes along that says, we'll do it faster, cheaper, better, has to be seen as a good thing for a marketer, but not if they can't actually deliver it. And I think that's the problem here, is that there needs to be a higher level of rigor in checking out these promises. And also marketers need to call out agencies that are consistently overpromising and under-delivering. Now, the only thing I'd say is good on Publicis Groupe out of Paris for calling this out. But I think they need to be really careful that they don't end up being the person in the glass house throwing a brick, because it could end up to hurt them.
Yes, and also if you're the one seen not to be using AI to try and cut costs as well when clients are having difficulty paying, do you think many clients are losing faith in agencies at the moment?
Look, I think that's been a long-term direction that we've seen. Trust and faith in an agency's ability is why one of the things that has been driving a global trend of marketers to build their own agency facilities in-house. And these overpromises, it's certainly no one is making a public statement about it. So, no one's going to say this agency did that or that, because they're worried about the reflection on their own reputation. But I think what happens is we've seen over time, agencies are not necessarily seen as the trusted advisor or the partner, as they like to talk about, my agency partners, that they once were.
And talk to us about what is next for AI when it comes to marketing.
Well, look, there's the automation, and most of the people, particularly agencies, have jumped on the bandwagon talking about productivity improvements. But I think the real advantage is going to be when we see AI applied to the huge amounts of data, and hopefully get to the point where it can sort out the wheat from the chaff. Because one of the problems marketers have with a lot of the data available to them is that it's a real mixed bag. I don't know about you, but I hate it when I get promotional material, emails, ads served to me that are totally irrelevant, largely because there's something wrong with the data that they've collected on me. And so AI's ability to weed through that and filter through it and actually start delivering to me the advertising that I actually need when I need it is going to be the big promise. But we're still a long way from that. It's starting to happen, but most of the initial promise seems to be about faster, cheaper, better, and producing more of the stuff that just gets in the way of the content we really want.
Yeah, all right, let's talk about ARN if we can, because they've staged a remarkable turnaround after overcoming that $80 million financial challenge. This high-profile dispute involving Kyle and Jackie O, well, half of it is at least over. We don't know what will happen with Jackie O here as well. What do you think about what has prevailed this week?
Look, I think Michael Steve-O Stevenson has done an amazing job here. He took over the role of the CEO with a $20 million a year contract that was going to go for 10 years in total. And it was underperforming. We saw two things. One is the ratings in Melbourne for the Kyle and Jackie O show were, let's say, underwhelming. But the other thing was that there was this growing group called the Mad Something Witches, who were also costing ARN about $22 million, it's estimated, in advertising by complaining about the content on Kyle or Jackie O. So, you're looking at a $44 million, $42 million a year cost to ARN. Steve-O's managed to come out of this so far for a cost of around $12 million, and also in many ways tied up Kyle with his fans as he tries to replicate Josh Rogan type podcast, which will be promoted through ARN. So look, I think he's done an amazing job. It'll be interesting, as you say, with Jackie O, but at least now there's a price set for a solution. It's around $12, $13 million. And she is in possibly a slightly worse position because of the fact that either her or her lawyers reportedly said that she could no longer work with Kyle, and so in many ways terminated the contract herself. Whereas Kyle, as you know, given time to fix it, and when he didn't, the ARN terminated.
I guess the issue is that you've got this situation now where they're paying out $30 million potentially for the two of them, $30 million that radio stations just don't have. Plus, they now have to fix the issue of who do they replace them with, and the ratings showing that it hasn't gone particularly well. I'm interested in the Kyle Sandilands aspect, though. There's an article on news.com.au talking about him today, saying that he was desperate to sign this because the longer he was off air, the more his star would fade in terms of that podcast. What do you make of that?
Also, Kyle has a very, let's say, lavish lifestyle. I'm sure it's not cheap, and probably was missing the regular paycheck that he was getting. So the other thing is it's 12 million over 3 years, Ahron. So, and also if they were smart, they may have had key person, let's call it key person insurance that may cover some of it. I don't know. But look, the fact that the share price bounced back on this news is evidence that at least the investors are seeing this as a positive outcome. I think, Kyle desperately loves the limelight, and in a way, $1.5 million of advertising to help promote his new venture, which is reportedly to be a subscription podcast. So it'll be
all right, we got to leave it there now, I'm afraid, but we'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, sir.